This story begins as a girl was riding in a wagon and was very nervous. She asked the lady sitting across from her if she was sure she was right for the part. She said the dispensary family wanted another daughter-in-law, and she ends up coming. But the girl looked at Lady Raina and said that was right. And after a while they arrived. When they got out of the carriage, the butler said that Lady Raina and Viscountess Evely had arrived. When the girl came out and started to look around the grounds, and she thought the estate was very huge. But at that moment some men approached them. One of them told Lady Raina to come through. The girl began to look at them carefully. One of the men welcomed her into the dispenser family. He then showed us the man standing next to him and told us that he was Felix, the eldest son of their family. The girl, when she saw him, thought he was insanely handsome, her husband. A few days before, in the Homewood family, Lady Raina came home with groceries. She heard arguing. The eldest daughter was arguing along with her daddy. Her name is Roxy, and she said she wouldn't marry a viscount, no way. The head of the house, Walter Homewood, said well, they would find her a better family. Then he gave her her papers and told her to look at them. Roxy immediately snatched them up and nervously started looking at everything. Raina didn't understand what had happened. When the girl wanted to pass on, she was shoved and butter flew out of her grocery bag. This girl who pushed her asked where the noise was coming from. Raina picked up the fallen groceries and said that mother had already come. Catherine Homewood is a countess. She asked why the girl was getting in her way, and Roxy continued to look at the papers. She said it didn't say anything about what kind of girl they wanted. Then Roxy looked at the girl and said that in that case it was okay to send Raina. The girl was shocked. She didn't expect that and dropped her grocery bag. Walter agreed with his daughter and said that she was definitely going. Rihanna asked where she was going, not realizing what was going on. The head of the family said that a letter had arrived proposing marriage from Viscount Dispenser, and for this they were promised a great deal of money. Times change. Aristocrats go bankrupt. Titles are devalued due to budget shortfalls. Where there's demand, there's supply. Viscount Dispenser put forward his proposal, but the title has nothing to do with society's opinion. It still has to be earned. Nobility is an innate quality. A family that bought a title with money didn't fit into society. Rihanna was surprised that in the end, to be true aristocrats, they asked for the hand of the Earl's daughter. Then the girl, after thinking it over, blurted out that she didn't want it, and thought that no matter how useful she was, I had enough money in the house even for food, so she was starving, but she kept trying her best. And in the end, they just want to get rid of her. But then suddenly Catherine said that she could not be sent there. They could not do it. The girl was very surprised. She couldn't believe that her mother didn't want to send her. Rihanna wanted her mom to be angrier, because she oh so didn't want to leave. But then the head of the family handed her the envelope and told Catherine to read the letter more carefully. The girl, when she read the letter, could not believe that he was going to sell his daughter for some pennies, and said that whatever the amount was, no, and that was it. She would not change her mind. But then suddenly, when she got to the amount, she was very much surprised and asked how much money was it anyway. Voltaire said it was 5,000 florins, as much as 5,000. Catherine thought that with this money they would live luxuriously for the rest of their lives, just like in the old days. Then she turned to Rihanna, called her little daughter, and told her that she absolutely had to go there and solve all their problems. She asked to be patient for the good of the family. I mean, maybe it was the mother who asked the girl not to be selfish. Rihanna was very sad about it, and her mother looked at her and thought she was just a freak. How could she even give birth to such a child? Catherine told her to repay her family who had not left her on the streets. If she married, she would pay for all her sins and become a useful child. Rihanna hesitated for a moment. The girl had wanted to hear those words for a very long time, but she wasn't very happy about it. Tears came to her eyes. Then Catherine told the girl to prepare something to eat. Then she turned to her second daughter and asked where Maurice was. Roxy said he'd be here at lunch. Then she asked if that meant she would have a collection of gorgeous dresses. Her mother replied that of course, and there would be shoes with all kinds of jewelry. Rihanna was left alone in the room with her bag of groceries. The girl realized that now she was no longer a part of that family, because she was kicked out and forced to cook dinner, as well as being given in marriage without her consent. No one wanted her now. A week later, guests arrived at Homewood Mansion. It was the Dispenser family in full force. The countess smiled and thought that she could not give in to petty lying nobles. So she said that they had come a long way to their house and must be very tired. Rihanna, who was standing nearby, couldn't see Morris anywhere, but at that moment the girl spoke, thanking them for agreeing to this marriage. It was Viscountess Evely de Spencer. The girl didn't know if she should bow as well, but when she wanted to say something, she was immediately interrupted by her mistress, turning to the Viscountess and saying that she needed to speak to her alone. They went out into another room, and Rihanna was left standing alone amongst all these guests who were beginning to get to know each other. The girl thought that apparently they were just selling her to the Dispenser family, and the wedding was just a formality, and she didn't even know who would be her husband. She figured if she said she went to them because that was what Roxy wanted, it would make more sense. Obviously, she'd be pissed if Rihanna didn't go. They would have to cancel the wedding. But then suddenly someone approached her. It was Mom. She came over and hugged her daughter and told her to treat the Viscountess with respect. She told her dear daughter to live a decent life. But when the girl wanted to say something to her mother, Catherine interrupted her and told her to go now. But then suddenly, as the girl picked up her things, the butler came up to her and asked if he could carry her suitcase. But Rihanna didn't expect that. She said there was no need for it because it was very light. The girl thought it would be better for her to go first. So she took the suitcase and ran away. As she ran, she wondered what else she could have expected. The girl called herself silly. After a while, she stepped outside and was approached by the Viscountess. She told Rihanna to choose which one she'd like to ride. Then the girl looked straight ahead and was very surprised. And the Viscountess said whether she wanted to go by carriage or by car. Rihanna thought for a moment and then pointed at the horse, saying she would be more comfortable riding the wagon. Evely agreed with her and said that she too liked the classics better. But at that moment, the girl heard someone's voice. Their eldest son, namely Maurice Homewood, ran outside to join them. When he saw the car, he said it was crazy cool. He walked closer to it and asked his father, it wouldn't cost them anything to buy one for themselves, would it? Rihanna saw him and thought that meant he didn't come out to say goodbye to her. But at that moment, another guy came outside. He was watching Rihanna intently, and in his eyes, she was beautiful. Roxy also came out to see her sister off. When she looked at the boy, she thought, why are all the men in that family so handsome? But then she thought it was none of her business at all anyway. So she turned around and walked back to the manor. Rihanna, after a while, said goodbye to everyone, got into the carriage, and they started on their way. At this time, her parents were looking at the suitcase of money they had been given. Catherine said that they had been paid even more than they had been promised. Everyone was very happy about the deal. The men of the Dispenser family got into the car. They were very cramped, especially the little boy. When his brother said that was why he had told him not to go and asked, then why did he tag along? The boy became indignant and said that everyone went. Of course, he had to go too, since he was the youngest member of the family. Then he turned to his other brother and said, besides, wasn't he supposed to ride in the carriage? But the man remained silent. The other brother said he must have been sent to them. He's tall as a bob and he doesn't show emotion. He'd just scare Lady Rihanna. But his brother looked angrily at him. Then he immediately shut up and laughed nervously. They began to whisper with the younger boy. And at this moment the guy, looking out the window, wondered what the girl's problem was. She was so shy all the time. When they arrived, Rihanna was surprised at how big the mansion was. She wondered if she would ever be able to finish cleaning such a huge house. But then she remembered that this family was quite wealthy, and not one she would be cleaning, so she even calmed down. But then suddenly Viscountess Evely turned to her and told the girl that everyone was already waiting for her in the parlor, so they should go already. Rihanna said okay, and they walked into the manor, closing the front door behind them. Rihanna, walking past various things, thought that everything in that mansion was so expensive. Then she thought that if she broke something, even by accident, it wouldn't end well. After that, they approached the room. A man saw her and told Lady Rihanna to come in. Then he said his name was Alex, and he was the owner of the Dispenser mansion. Then Alex said that her future spouse was standing opposite him. When the girl saw him, she thought he was very handsome. In front of her stood the eldest son of their family, a boy named Felix. But when he looked at the girl and their gazes met, she immediately looked away. She felt very uncomfortable about it. Alex smiled when he saw all this. Then he turned to Felix and asked if he could handle it himself. After that, the Viscountess said, Eden, the second son in seniority, is standing next to him. He has light brown hair, and the youngest is named Jeffrey. The girl said her name was Evely herself. The girl said that she thought that was the end of the acquaintance. After that, she offered to sit down. After that, they all went into the hall. They sat in silence for a few minutes, their eyes fixed on Rihanna. At this point, the Viscountess coughed, and with a look tried to tell them not to look at her anymore, because she noticed that the girl was uncomfortable with the whole thing. Then she turned to Rihanna and said that she must be very tired, just like them. She then suggested that they talk about family a little later, but first they should talk about the wedding ceremony. Rihanna agreed. Then Evely said they would have the ceremony in 2 years, but for now, the two of them could consider themselves engaged to each other. The girl thought it was taking too long. Then she didn't have to come to them right now at all if it wasn't going to be that soon. Evely said she plans to have a simple wedding ceremony with her family. They may think 2 years is too long, but it is quite long enough. But the girl wasn't listening to her anymore. Rihanna realized that this was a test. If she failed to do her job, she would be thrown out of the mansion immediately. She couldn't believe it. When the Viscountess was done, Rihanna picked up her bag and said that in that case she apologized, but would go to her room first. The girl agreed and told her to get a good night's rest. When the doors slammed behind her, Felix jumped up and told his mother it was too long. 6 months, a year at the most. But Evely told him not to start. The woman said that maybe Rihanna wouldn't even like him. The boy was very surprised and asked how that was so. Mom laughed and asked if he thought for sure he was going to love her. She'd agreed to the wedding because it was the only decent way to get Rihanna out of that family. Evely said that she did not want their wedding to take place when the girl did not yet love him. She had not come to them of her own free will. The girl said that they had paid her family and thus ransomed Rihanna. Felix slowly began to calm down. He sat down on the sofa again and said that he didn't need to talk about it so bluntly. At that moment, the mother thought that her son was also in a hurry. Then she closed her eyes and remembered a moment from the past. When Felix and the others were still children, Evely saw a girl with bright yellow hair and said she wanted to adopt her. The girl who was standing next to her said that this was Lady Rihanna Homewood, and she was very happy that this girl was visiting their orphanage. Evely immediately apologized for her rudeness, and she said that this girl just had an incredibly beautiful smile. That's when she opened her eyes and came back to reality. You know, when you really hope that Rihanna can be happy, at least at their place. But if not, she has decided that they will follow her plan. Evely really wants Felix to try to win her heart. After their meeting, Alex, the head of the family, was left alone. He felt resentful that only his wife could talk to Rihanna. The man thought that he wanted to be friends with her too. He wondered how his dear Rihanna would prefer to call him father, daddy, or papa. He would have preferred the latter, but he would not want her to call him Viscount for anything. After the meeting, they all went to bed. But suddenly, Rihanna woke up abruptly. She didn't realize what time it was. Then the girl got out of bed, put on her slippers, and started walking. She didn't understand why her alarm clock didn't ring, because her mom was going to scold her. But then she looked around and realized it was to wife. Her house. She opened the curtains and looked out the window, thinking that she hadn't slept like this in a very long time, for the first time since she was 12. Rihanna looked out the window for a bit and realized that she needed to hurry up and go to the kitchen. She then went downstairs, and when she entered the kitchen, she apologized to the maid who was standing there. The girl was very surprised and asked why Lady was here now. All the maids began to look at her carefully. Then the girl said that she was the girl the master had told them about. She had recently arrived at the mansion. The maid looked at Rihanna and realized that it was indeed her. Then the woman introduced herself and said her name was Marie, and she was the chef. She asked the girl why she was in the kitchen so early. Was something wrong? Rihanna was starting to get a little worried. She asked if she didn't have to do anything. The girl said she could bake bread and make stew, and she was very good at cleaning. Marie was shocked. She didn't understand what was going on and said that she didn't have to do anything after all, so let her just go and do her own thing. Rihanna thought at this moment that if she couldn't help in any way, she would definitely be kicked out, and it wouldn't work that way. Then she turned around and saw an apron hanging in the corner. She grabbed it and said she would find her own thing to do then. Then she started running up to the surfaces. Rihanna grabbed herself some groceries and began to prepare the dish. And after a while, everyone was already awake and went to the banquet hall to have breakfast. Alex, who was already sitting at the table, saw the girl and asked why she was standing there on the sidelines. Felix pulled up a chair for her and told her to take a seat next to him. Rihanna walked over to him and said okay, she would sit down. She was actually surprised that she was asked to sit with them, but she thought there was no way out. Then Felix asked her if she wanted milk or tea, what she wanted more. Rihanna hesitated for a moment, and then said she wanted milk. The guy smiled and said okay. Then she thanked him. When everyone started to eat, Alex suddenly noticed some strange dish that was standing not far from him. Then he asked, "What is it?" Rihanna said she made it herself, and if he doesn't want to eat it, that's okay. She won't be offended. But Alex at that moment decided to try the dish. Everyone was shocked that Rihanna cooked some dish by herself, but he was the first to take a fork, so the honor was given to him. But little Jeffrey beat him to it and put a bite of it on his fork. When he tasted it, he told Ryan that it was delicious. After that, the rest of the family also tasted the dish and started praising the girl for making it insanely delicious. Rihanna was pleased with all the praise, smiled, and said that next time she would cook for everyone. But Alex at that moment told her, "No." The girl was shocked, but she thought that the sea all too quickly got bored of her food, and he complained about it all the time. Rihanna thought to herself, not surprisingly, Alex, after all, ate food much tastier than her omelette every day. But then the man suddenly said that he hadn't brought her to the manor to make their breakfasts. Alex said she didn't have to do it if she didn't want to, but he'd really like her to give him a dish for his birthday that she'd cooked herself. The man asked if she could pull it off, but Rihanna didn't have time to say anything back before Jeffrey suddenly said to get cooked in real life too, because his dad isn't the only cool one. Eden turned to his younger brother at this point and said that he always uses his trick with the youngest child in the family. But the girl interrupted them all at that moment and shouted out happily that she was willing to cook it all for them. After that, they all continued their breakfast. Suddenly, Alex turned to Felix and asked how things were with Duke Carnal. The boy replied that it was too early to talk about anything. Dad said he was just really interested in the process. Felix said that if anything went wrong, she would be sure to tell him. His face was very unhappy. Alex didn't understand why his son was so angry, but then he said, "Okay." At that moment, Felix looked at the empty plate where the omelet used to be and thought that his wife had made breakfast, and he was the only one who hadn't even tasted it. Rihanna sat and watched all of this family talk. It was surprising to her because at Homewood during the meal, no one said a word. She suddenly wondered if she would ever be able to join their fascinating conversation. But then suddenly someone approached the girl. It was Evely. She asked Rihanna if she had already eaten. The girl said yes. Then the Viscountess told her to go and rest for a while. The girl was very surprised and said, "What about cleaning?" But then she sighed heavily, said, "Okay," and started to go to her room. When she was almost out the door, she was approached at the end and suggested that she meet for a cup of tea at lunchtime, asking the girl what she would say to that. Rihanna was surprised at first, but then she smiled and said, "All right." After that, she bowed and walked out the door. Suddenly Alex turned to Evely and asked what about him. But Evely said that he couldn't, because it was a women's meeting and men shouldn't be there. Alex felt very bad about that. He started muttering something to himself. His wife thought he'd gotten so stiff the last few days, and she had no idea what that was about. Afterward, the girl reflected that he was the first to talk about accepting her into the family, and there was nothing wrong with him wanting a daughter. Evely looked at her husband and thought that the older he got, the more he acted just like a child. At this time, a maid was accompanying Rihanna. She said that the ladies' room was nearby, so it shouldn't be a problem. The girl said, "All right," and she thought to herself that there were a lot of beautiful and unusual objects in this place. At that moment, the maid suddenly turned to her and said that she didn't seem to have introduced herself yet. Then she said that her name was Jane, and that she would look after the girl. Jane said that if anything went wrong with her, to have the girl call her right away. Rihanna replied that there was no need at all, so they worried. But the maid didn't understand what she was talking about. Then the girl said that it was all right. If she needed anything, she would certainly turn to her. Jane agreed, and they went on their way. After a while, Rihanna knocked on the library door. Alvy let her in. The girl came to the tea party that Viscountess Avely had told her about, apologized to her, and told her to help herself first, because she still had some things to settle. Rihanna agreed. She sat down at a small table and poured herself a cup of tea. After that, she started drinking. At that moment, Avely approached her and asked if she liked the room. She tried to please, but she didn't know what was fashionable for young girls. Then she said that she could decorate it as she wished. But Rihanna said right off the bat that she didn't like it at all. She loved it. But she said the closet was a little weird. Maybe there was a mistake. Avely realized what she was talking about and said that of course there was a closet. She's right, after all, there should be a walk-in closet instead of a closet. But there's too little room for a closet on this one. But Rihanna immediately stopped her and told her that wasn't what she meant at all. There was just too much stuff in the closet for her, like it was a completely different person's room. The girl conceived that the things were so beautiful, and she would certainly like to wear them for a while. But she didn't deserve all that. Avely seemed to remember and said it was their gift for her. The girl was shocked. Avely said there were gifts from everyone, raincoats from Alex and elegant things from Felix. Eden gave her a beautiful dress, and the cute purses and jewelry are from Jeffrey. The Viscountess said everyone has their own preferences, and it's always interesting to find out who gave what. Rihanna thanked her, and the girl said that they had been preparing for his arrival all together, and it seemed a little unfair that she was the only one thanked. Rihanna agreed with her, but then she said, "Thank you," and called the girl Mom. Avely smiled and suggested she talk a little about the tea ceremony. Rihanna agreed. She couldn't believe that she was really welcome in this house. Suddenly the woman asked if there was anything she wanted to do. Rihanna was surprised by the question and asked what she meant by that. The Viscountess said that times had changed, and now a girl also needed to be able to live on her own. Rihanna was surprised, but then she realized that was right. She doesn't know if they will kick her out of the manor after these 2 years. She thought that Avely probably meant that she needed to start preparing for this now, to support herself even if they didn't want her in their mansion. Then the Viscountess asked the girl if she had studied anything yet. Rihanna answered that she had only studied the basics of history. The girl said that she personally would like to study philosophy and psychology. It would be nice to learn to draw or play a musical instrument. She said they could go to museums and theaters together. The girl was already beginning to imagine how fun and interesting it would be. But then suddenly she looked at Rihanna, who was sitting there looking sad, as if she was thinking about something else. Avely told her that she didn't have to study if she didn't want to. She took her hands in hers and said that she just wanted Rihanna to know the basics of science. At this point, she thought that she had made a lot of enemies, and if she went out into society without an education, she would be hurt and bullied. Avely said she's not asking her to decide anything right now, but she really wants her to have the experience, and most importantly, to find something she really loves. So Rihanna thought for a moment and said that she basically agreed with her. When the girl nodded and said that was the end of their tea ceremony. Avely said that the girl must be tired, so let her go inside and rest for a while. Rihanna bowed before leaving, and after that she left. Avely, left alone, thought she knew her situation and understood the pain. She had been watching the girl for a long time, and so he doesn't want her to feel uncomfortable. That's why I somehow thought it would be better to just talk to her. After a while, Rihanna was already back in her room. She sat on her bed and thought about the fact that Roxy had a private tutor and Maurice went to King's School. The girl thought that they were so clever and knew a lot of things, and she could only read. At that moment, she remembered the question the Viscountess had asked her, what she wanted to learn. Rihanna was very tired after the work she had done, and in her free time she could only sleep. The girl thought that maybe it would be better if she read books during this time. The girl wondered, even if she could study, would she be able to make up for all the years she had missed? It made her feel uncomfortable. Rihanna lay on her bed and thought that she wanted to learn to play the piano. At that moment she remembered working for someone in a noble house, and the girl was learning to play. Then she was downright mesmerized by the way her fingers moved across the keys, and the music coming out of this beautiful instrument. When evening came, Jane knocked on the girl's door and said it was time for supper. When Rihanna didn't answer, the maid immediately ran to the banquet hall, where the family members were already gathered, and turned to Ma'am. She said that Raina seemed very sick. Evely was very surprised and told them to call Joshua right away. After a while, Joshua arrived. While he examined the girl, Evely and Alex sat back and watched. Vicanessa said it was all her fault. She was pushing her too hard. That's when the girl screamed that Rihanna shouldn't do anything. Joshua is the Dispenser family's personal physician, and he began to examine the girl. He was on his way from the house itself before he was called in the middle of dinner. He was told that the little lady was in a critical condition, and he thought he would have to live on 2 houses. She's Felix's fiancée, but they're only engaged for now, and apparently he's not even going to be invited to the wedding. Joshua was just getting out of the carriage to say hello to Alex when he swooped down and told him to go get him right away. And so he is now in the girl's room and beginning his examination. The Viscount and the Viscountess have been like this for hours. Even though the doctor has explained to them that it is a simple cold, they still think she is deathly ill. At that moment, Joshua thought, the 2 of them hadn't cried even when Eden was bleeding. The doctor thought that, of course, the cold was dangerous in some way. After he finished examining the girl, he said that her weight and skin condition indicated a lack of nutrition. He would arrange for the medicine and supplements to be given and sent to them tomorrow. Evely was shocked when she heard all this. She cried even harder, but Joshua told her not to worry, because it was just a cold. After that, he said he would leave them alone. He got into the carriage and drove back to his house. It was already deep into the night, and Rihanna continued to lie in her room and sleep. Suddenly someone came in. He walked over to her bed and sat in a chair. It was Felix. He was very upset after thinking about the words his parents had told him about her being malnourished. And then I remembered the time at the orphanage 4 years ago. Felix and his brother were looking for Jeffrey, and when they did find him, lo and behold, they saw some girl next to him. Felix was speechless when he saw her. She was so beautiful. The girl at this point put a band-aid on Jeffrey's mutton knee and said to treat it properly, and it would be all right. The boy thanked her for it, and his brothers came up to them. Then Eden said that they owed her a debt of gratitude. The girl was surprised and asked if they knew this child. Eden smiled and said that yes, they knew him very well. After that, he explained that they came to the kindergarten as volunteers, and this kid ran away from them. They were looking for him, and the girl helped them find him. Rihanna said it was no big deal, but then suddenly Eden said that since they were already here, could she show them the way back so they wouldn't get lost? Then she realized that while they were looking for Jeffrey, they had gotten lost themselves, taking a wrong turn. Then the girl said they could follow her. She was on her way back. The boys thanked her. When they returned to the shelter, Jeffrey was immediately taken to the nurse. She examined and treated his wound and said that he was now completely healthy. The boy was very happy about this and said he didn't have any more pain. Rihanna told him that if he came to volunteer in the future, he should be careful when he went into the forest with the children. There are a lot of rocks, and if you go too far, you can even come across snakes. The boy jumped up and down happily and said, well, he would be very careful from now on. His brothers at this point thought that he actually ran away because he didn't want to do volunteer work and got lost. Bottom line. But at that moment, 2 guys came running into their room. One of them said that Rihanna was in there, so they ran up to her and told her to play with them. The girl agreed, but said that first she had to arrange the medicines, and then she would come. The children agreed. One of them approached Jeffrey and asked if he would play with them. The boy said of course he would. Eden went along with them. Then a boy came up to Felix and said he could play with them too. The boy answered well. But then suddenly Rihanna came up to him and told him that he would help her put the medicine away, and they would join him a little later. Felix was surprised and wondered if he had promised to help her. When all the children had gone, Rihanna put him to bed with a cloth over his head. She said it was a good antipyretic, and he would feel better quickly. Felix was surprised and asked how she knew he was sick. The girl thought at that moment that she had never seen him like that before. But then she said that it's just always noticeable when a person hides pain, and besides, she noticed that he had a fever by his cheeks, which were flushed. Rihanna says she's sure he'll feel much better after half an hour in bed, and he can take it easy. She'll tell the others that they're sorting out the meds together. Suddenly the girl began to hear the voices of the children calling for her. Then Rihanna answered that she would come and wake him up in about half an hour, and wished him sweet dreams. Felix thanked her and thought to himself that he was a little ticklish. After that, the girl walked out. But after that incident with Rihanna, something happened, and he was awakened by the Mother Superior. He visited the orphanage many times, sometimes under the guise of sponsorship or ministry. And by some miracle, he kept going back to that place. It was quite a while before he saw her again. One day he and his brother Jeffrey were walking along, and it was his brother who noticed him first. They came closer to her to say hello, but even too much time had passed, and Rihanna didn't recognize them. They walked past each other like strangers, but Jeffrey said it was no big deal. And if Rihanna didn't recognize him, then it was just growing up and changing here. The guy said it was even good that she didn't remember those moments when he cried like a baby. In fact, Felix was even disappointed that he hadn't even noticed that Rihanna, who was next to him, was sick. He didn't understand how it had even happened, because that time, even without signs of his illness, she had immediately realized everything. The guy was shocked that he hadn't even noticed that Rihanna, who was next to him, was sick. He didn't understand how it even happened, because that time she, even without signs of his illness, immediately realized everything. But then suddenly his musings were interrupted by the girl's concerned breathing. When he looked at her, he noticed that she was awake. Rihanna woke up and felt that her head hurt a lot. She didn't realize when she had fallen asleep, but then she remembered that she had felt sick. The girl thought she'd never had a cold before. But when she looked to the side, she saw that she wasn't alone in the room. The girl, seeing Felix, did not realize how long he had been sitting, and most importantly, why. But when she wanted to sit up, she felt a strong pain in her stomach. Felix looked at the girl and asked if she was awake yet. Rihanna answered that she wasn't. He then sat down next to her on the bed and felt her forehead, telling her that her fever had broken. Rihanna was a little embarrassed because it was the first time in her life someone cared about her. Then Felix asked if she was hungry. He could bring something from the kitchen, but the girl said there was no need, she could do it herself. Felix, of course, wasn't listening anymore. He started walking towards the exit and said he would be right back. She let him rest for now. When he left, Rihanna thought he would be back very quickly with those long legs. But then suddenly she was surprised and wondered if she had sweated so much in her sleep. Rihanna figured the kitchen was on the first floor, so she'd better get cleaned up before he came back, and she started to get out of bed. At this point, Felix, as he walked to the kitchen, wondered if she could get her a glass of warm milk or perhaps a cup of good black tea, which would relax her better. The guy thought he'd have to ask her in the future what she preferred more, and after a while he had already taken what he needed and went into her room. But at first he didn't see her and wondered where she had gone. When he looked to the side, he saw that she was starting to change her clothes. Rihanna was very scared, so she screamed, and Felix was scared too, so he ran out the door. His brothers came running to his scream and scolded him, and they didn't understand how he could do that. Jeffrey even said he was a pervert. A few days later, Dr. Joshua came to see the girl again. He said he could cause a burning sensation, so she had to be patient for a while. Even if she has already taken her medication, still have her always take them with her, and never take them on an empty stomach. Dr. Joshua spoke to Rihanna as gently as if he were talking to a child, and the girl was already almost healthy. Before she left, the doctor said she'd watch her a little longer to be sure. After that, Evely came in and asked the girl if she was bored sitting alone in the room. After that, she said that she had some lemon juice for her, because vitamin C is good for the body. Vicomtesse asked the doctor if he could be alone with Rayanne. Joshua said not for too long, she wasn't fully recovered yet, so she needed to rest. When they were alone, Rihanna tasted the drink and said that the lemon was so sweet, she had no idea. Evely explained that she had warmed it with honey to make it easier to drink, and asked if she liked it. The girl replied that it was really very tasty. She had been very sick for the last few days, but everyone was kind to her. They advised her something high in calories to keep her energy and strength up, so they cooked a lot of different goodies. Alex, when he saw her, told her to be a little more careful, and she looks much better than before. Everyone started apologizing to her for not being attentive and seeing that she was sick, and Jeffrey told the girl that he would make sure she didn't regret coming into their family. Evely always said she shouldn't do anything, let her rest and recover as soon as possible. but a girl can't just sit still when they care and worry about her so much. While they were drinking juice, Rihanna turned to her mom and said what she said the other day. The girl was surprised and asked, "She means studying?" Rihanna said that yes, she would, and she would do her best to catch up. Evely said that it's okay if she doesn't try too hard because her health comes first. Rihanna replied that she was very embarrassed because she didn't know anything, so she really wanted to try. She really wants to be part of their family and not be ashamed of herself. So the girl said that she wants to be proud of herself in the future, and for them not to be ashamed of her. Evely smiled and thanked her for that. She really was glad because the girl didn't want Rihanna to be bullied in any way because of her knowledge. When evening came, Felix poured more wine into himself at Flat Hill. He wasn't actually home. He's known since that day that it was for business, but he'll have to apologize to Rihanna when he gets back. And he's too embarrassed about what he did. He still couldn't understand how he had just walked in without knocking, but suddenly a voice broke him from his thoughts. A man came up to him and asked him when he had gotten back. Felix immediately recognized that voice. At that moment, Loy Cornwall, the Duke of Cornwall, came up to him. He told Felix that he had heard that he had spent a great deal of money. The boy thought that rumors spread very quickly after all, though it would be strange if rumors spread after such a big purchase. One pleasure is to spend the money received after the sale of his daughter to the Viscount. The status of aristocrats was always close to bankruptcy, as the spouses from this family were generously endowed with avarice, stupidity, and also greed. Plus their eldest son, Maurice Homewood, is the stupidest of all doves, without a shred of empathy or compassion. And yet the only one worth paying attention to is Roxy Homewood. She's always gorgeous, but she treats Ryan with disdain and has no pity for people. She is the least known of all the debutantes. Then suddenly Lloyd interrupted him from his musings and asked, "Isn't that too much money for dispensers?" He said that Felix, though he'd spent a lot of money, hadn't been out lately. Does he regret his decision? And if he didn't, he asked, then maybe something happened. Then this guy suddenly asked, "Does he understand correctly that Felix is not going to tell him about his wife before he comes?" He'd heard a rumor that he'd quit his job. Felix said he didn't know what he was talking about. Then Lloyd asked if he didn't want to tell him directly. Would it be better for him to find out for himself? And he asked if he was okay with that, right? Felix looked at him angrily, but then suddenly someone else came up to them and asked them what it was he was going to find out. Lloyd turned and saw Aaron and said that maybe he would stop harassing Prince Felix already and leave him alone. At this point, Felix himself, inwardly thinking that he would not tire of the tackiness, and the Count of the Hague, Aaron, asked if he was too late. In fact, he's been following Lloyd around since the Royal Academy. He's been following him since the day he first got here. Felix said that if the rumors were directly from Earl Homewood, it would be strange. One of the guys said sure. The incomparable Felix should be in line to raise his status. Handsome, well-mannered, educated, and talented, head of the first branch of the Royal Academy. Aaron said there are no such viscounts here, though it seems intimidating at first glance. But in fact he is a very studious young man, and if all the daughters of this world knew about him, there would be a new ocean of tears. Felix didn't know what they were talking about. Then Aaron jokingly asked if he was going to beat them up during the Festival of Forgiveness. Felix got up and said that the two of them seemed to have a lot to talk about, so he'd better go. Lloyd told him to stay, and they talked about work. But as Felix walked toward the exit, the boy was surprised and asked if he was really leaving. And then he thought, are they really not close enough to talk like that? Aaron said that he hadn't changed at all since he was a kid. After that, Felix went to the Festival of Forgiveness. He thought it had been so long. And so a great deal of time passed. Rihanna began to learn art and drew a picture. When Evely saw it, she said it was beautiful this time. The girl asked if she really thought so. The Viscountess said it was true, and she wanted the painting very much. The girl said she would probably send it to her father-in-law. Rihanna said the fall landscape would probably be very pretty too, and if she drew an even better one, she asked if her mother would show her the study. Evely said that her drawings showed the great influence of her family. But then she asked if she and Felix had quarreled. The girl didn't understand and asked her what she meant. Then she asked what had happened. He'd gone to Flat Hill and he hadn't come back yet. In that case, they couldn't announce their engagement. Rihanna immediately said that no, they weren't fighting at all. In fact, they never met after that day. The girl wondered if he was so offended by her reaction. The Viscountess said that the engagement had not yet been arranged, but she wanted the girl to remember that she was already a dispenser anyway. Rihanna looked at her and told her mother that she had it all memorized, but the Viscountess said she had something for her. The girl said that it was not known when the engagement would take place, so she thought it would be better to hand it over now. After that, she gave her the box. Rihanna thought that this box looked quite expensive. Then she told the mistress that they had already given her so much already, and she could not accept it. Rihanna thought that especially Jeffrey had given her so many gifts. The girl had told him then that she couldn't even express the gratitude she felt. She had never seen such a thing before. Jeffrey was very happy. Only she was the only one to receive his gifts, so he really asked that she just accept them and be happy. But at that moment Evely opened this box. There was a beautiful jewelry with precious stones in it. In it, Rihanna saw it and was very frightened. She thought it looked very, very expensive. Evely, seeing her expression, said that it was a family jewel, the blessed blue, so she could feel free to accept it. After all, she was now a member of their family too. Rihanna thanked her in a quiet voice and told her that she would treasure it. The Viscountess replied that she thought it would be perfect for her, and she thought that this little Felix, he must come back before the festival, or it would not end well. But then suddenly she remembered and told the girl that they had given her something from her house. Evely said her family was coming to visit before the festival. Rihanna was terrified when she heard that. She didn't want to see her parents, and especially not at the estate. Evely said that if she didn't want to see them, she would quietly refuse them. Rihanna thought that it was as if she were going back to the past, when everyone had only humiliated and beaten her. She shuddered at the thought of them coming. She thought that if the people on the estate knew who she was at home, she didn't know whether they would continue to consider her part of their family or just turn away. Rihanna was very scared about it. But the Viscountess told her that even though there had been no formal engagements yet since her arrival on their estate, she had become a dispenser, and nothing else would change that. At this point, the girl thought that since she was already a member of their family, she was no longer Rihanna Homewood. She was now Rihanna, the dispenser. So everything would be okay. After a while, her family arrived at the manor after all. Evely met the Countess and said she was glad they had come. Catherine said that she was the one who should rejoice over them. The girl was together with her second daughter, Roxy. The Countess laughed and said that she was so welcome that the girl didn't even know how to be. But Evely said that they had not come to see her, but their daughter Rihanna. She wondered if they had decided to visit her on their way to the capital. Catherine replied that she did, except she didn't see her anywhere and asked where her daughter was now. Evely replied that she seemed to be preparing for the festival right now, but she would be here soon, so she didn't have to worry. At that moment, Roxy tried to hold back her laughter and thought that she was probably hiding from them on purpose. It was already spring, and there was only one reason why no invitation had come to them yet, and that was that a wedding was not even out of the question. Roxy thought that apparently Rihanna was trying hard to hide her dirty and ugly on Arthur, except she didn't know who would believe her. The girl wants to see what became of the gentlewoman who did nothing but clean the house all day long. She figured that, after all, Rihanna could never change. But at that moment, when she decided to have some tea, she looked up and saw that Ryan started to come down to them. The girl was shocked. She choked because of the surprise. Rihanna walked into them, and she apologized for the wait. The girl was simply beautifully dressed. It was the very thing that made Roxy envious. Even Catherine, when she saw her daughter, asked if it was really her. Rayanne smiled and replied that it was her. She also asked how they were doing. Roxy thought at this point that it couldn't be a question. Then she said that Botha had made her tea and milk, and thought that she was their cook after all. Rihanna, not a super hottie. Roxy said she always did, didn't she? And then asked if she really did. Evely was shocked when she heard that. But after that, she took the girl's hands and said there was absolutely no need for that. She then turned to Roxy and told her to ask the servant for it when he came up. Rihanna realized in that moment what that feeling meant. That very feeling of love and protection from a loved one. She took the Viscountess's hand and said it was all right. She told her that they were her guests after all, and it was the least she could do for them. Roxy was pleased that she had made her serve after all. She figured that no matter what Rihanna looked like, she would still be serving, and it suited her better that way. She said the last phrase out loud, and after that, she walked out the door with Rihanna. She looked around and thought the house was very nicely decorated, but she had another goal in mind. She wanted to find out what she was hiding. Roxy then saw the maid and walked over to her. She told Jane to take her to Rihanna's room right away. The maid bowed and said that even though she was a bone in the manor, it was a bit difficult to get into the younger mistress's room. Roxy wasn't going to listen to her. She swung around and slapped her on the cheek. Then she said that people didn't know their duties in this house, and asked how the maid dared to cross her at all. Roxy says she's saying twice, she won't. So have the maid take her to Ryan's room now. Jane had no choice, so she took her. The girl, upon opening the room, immediately asked the maid if she had brought her in correctly. Jane was crying, but she said it was right, as she had asked for the room. She then said that if Roxy had already looked at the room, they'd better go back. But she didn't listen to her. She slammed the doors in her face, and that was it. Looking around, she noticed that even Rihanna had curtains hung up for her. She looked at the closet and was surprised that it had all been bought just for her. And at that point, Roxy started putting different dresses and jewelry and things like that into her suitcase. And just before she wanted to leave, she noticed the dresser. So she went over to it, and she was very curious about what was in it. When the girl opened it, she saw the drawer, and when she looked inside, she thought she knew it. Roxy didn't understand why she was hiding such beauty. When the guests finally left, Evely exhaled and said that it wasn't after all. Those guests you'll want to see again. Rihanna thanked her mother again. Then she said they were even able to escort them out without any accidents the first time. Evely stroked the girl's head and said that she now looked at her and saw only a worthy mistress dispenser. The Countess thanked her for her patience and said that the girl did a great job and stood up for herself even in the face of these attacks they were making. Roxy, who was on her way to her home wearing the jewelry she had stolen, rode contentedly. And so, when Rihanna returned to her room, she almost fainted, because when she looked in the drawer where she had put the jewelry that the Viscountess had given her, she found nothing. Then the girl immediately called Jane. The maid came running in. She was in shock and did not understand what had happened. Then Rihanna asked if she had cleaned her room by any chance the previous day, but Jane said she hadn't, because Mrs. Evely had ordered her not to interfere. Upon arriving in her room, she immediately fell onto her bed and fell asleep, so Jane didn't do anything. Rihanna listened to her carefully and asked if anyone had come into her room. Jane immediately fell on her knees and begged Mrs. Ryan for mercy. The girl said that yesterday a guest had asked to come into her room. When Rihanna heard this, she was shocked. She leaned against the drawer and was desperate. She told the maid that she'd better not tell anyone about it. In the afternoon, Rihanna went out into the garden to admire the flowers and reflect on what had happened earlier. The girl noticed that Jane's cheek was very swollen. She guessed that Roxy had probably hit her for disobedience, as she had done to herself before. The girl didn't know what to do now. She was sorry that she had let Evely down, and tears rolled down her eyes, because the Viscountess trusted her with her family heirloom and she just took it and lost it. Well, or rather, it was stolen. Rihanna thought she should have been much more careful. She should have known Roxy was capable of this. Then suddenly the girl thought that if she didn't find her at all, what would she do then? And at that moment Eden came up to her. He leaned over and seeing her tears gave her a handkerchief so she wouldn't have to wipe them with her sleeve. Rihanna quickly started to wipe them off and wanted to make some kind of excuse, but she stopped talking abruptly. Then Eden suggested and said that she must be very lonely alone. The girl would like to say she didn't, and so when she was about to say something to him, he interrupted her and said that if she didn't want to, let her not say it. The guy took the handkerchief from her and said that everyone has days when they really want to cry, and today was probably one of those days for her. He sat down next to her and told her there was nothing wrong with it at all, and she could be unashamed of her tears. But at that moment she started crying again. Then the guy told her to stop crying already, because everything would be okay. Rihanna didn't even feel her tears flowing. When she calmed down a little, she thanked Eden for everything and said that it was only because of his help that she felt a little better. The boy nodded at her. When after a brief silence, she asked if he knew what a blessed blue was, Eden looked at her carefully. He didn't understand what she was saying, but Rayanne replied that today she had realized that she had lost him. The boy was shocked when he heard that. He asked how she could have lost him. The girl said that it seems her precious sister took it away when she was visiting. And at that moment the girl looked up at the sky. Afterward, Rayanne explained that if she liked something, she'd be sure to take it for herself. On the other hand, she would certainly like to believe that it wasn't her. But you can't deny the obvious. Then the girl gathered all her will into a fist and said that she must find him and bring him back. Rihanna, of course, doesn't know if they'll let her into the Homewood house. But even if she asked Roxy about the necklace right now, the girl still wouldn't give her anything back. Eden laughed when he heard this and said that she didn't need to go that far to see her sister. She could meet at the festival in the capital. When Rihanna heard that, she remembered that they were going to the festival too. She'd almost gone to her empty mansion and made that mistake. Then the boy offered to go together in order to search for the blessed blue. He said he wasn't Felix, but he could help her in some way. She could be sure of that. Afterward, Eden took her hand and said as he asked her what happened. He was very happy when the girl said that she wasn't crying because of her life on the estate. The whole family was worried that it might be difficult for her to live alone in an unfamiliar place. He said that if she suddenly had any difficulties, she could share it with him, as she did today. He also asked that the girl promise him that she wouldn't cry alone anymore. Let her not forget that they were a family after all. Ryan, she said okay, and after that they laughed out loud together. Everything was nice and calm. Felix was sitting at the table at the time, reading letters from his brother Eden. He wrote about the incident that had happened to Rihanna and said that he would help her, of course, as he had promised, but let his brother keep in mind that in 2 years, her husband might be someone else. Lloyd, hearing all this, said that he was partly right after all. Felix got angry and asked if he even knew what he was saying. The guy looked at him in surprise and told Felix to calm down. He doesn't know what it was that happened between the two of them, but avoidance isn't the answer. Lloyd said that of course he could keep hiding from her, but if he wanted to see her, it was time to come out of his den and act like a decent man. At this time, the next day had already come, and Rihanna, along with Eden, were riding in the wagon to carry out their plan. The girl suddenly lowered her head. Eden, seeing this, asked if she was all right. She looked very pale somehow. If it was because they were in a carriage, they could go a little slower, but Rihanna replied that she wasn't at all. She's just a little worried. The girl thought that she absolutely had to find that jewelry. Even if Evely got angry, she would understand. But then suddenly the guy asked, "She's not just going to have a nice conversation with her sister, is she?" He said he thought she could use a couple of good talking points, and with those words he raised his fist. "Rihanna, are you all in your voice yet?" she asked. "Is he really suggesting hitting her?" Eden replied that yes, let her know who she was messing with. After that, he told her to clench her palm into a fist and concentrate all the power in it. The girl began to repeat the movements after him. Then she demonstrated the kick on him and asked if that was it. The guy replied that yes, that's right, and she's even much stronger than she looks. And even Coachman heard that kick. He was very surprised and asked if they were doing well there. Eden shouted to him that everything was fine and they were letting him in, not paying attention. He turned to Rihanna then and told her to be careful because she might accidentally make a mistake due to the shaking. But when she noticed that their hands were still holding each other, she immediately pulled away. After that, Eden looked out the window and told her to take a look too. Apparently, they were just in time. Rihanna pulled back the curtain and looked outside. Outside, everything was beautifully decorated. Fireworks exploded somewhere and the guests were talking to each other and dressed up. The Festival of Forgiveness was now in full swing. Rihanna was delighted. She said that the festival was really as big as they say it is. Eden suddenly wondered if his brother had arrived yet. Even though he was trying to be intimidating, he still carried no threat. Then he told the coachman to stop. Rihanna was surprised and asked if they would get out. There they are at the guest house. They could look around a little more. But Eden looked at the girl, smiled, and said that this wasn't just Central Square, but this area of Shepherd's Palace. After that, they entered the room, where there were already a lot of guests. When they saw the girl, they immediately started whispering to each other. Eden turned to her and said that the fight she wasn't afraid of, if anything his brother, so everything should be under control. It had been about a month since Rihanna had last spoken to Felix. The girl thought it would be awkward to talk to him after a long silence. Eden put a hand on her shoulder for some sort of support and told her to go and just try not to think about anything. The guy said that he would wait for her here for the time being. The girl left and he wished her good luck and waved goodbye. The guy thought that she must have been more upset than excited by the news. He didn't know what had happened between her and his brother. Suddenly he thought, what if she hated him in the end? When Rihanna entered the ballroom, she immediately saw Roxy standing there talking to someone. She was, of course, wearing the stolen jewelry. The girl mustered up her courage and went straight to her sister, shouting her name. When the girl turned around, she said that Baroque gave her back what she had stolen because the item was very dear to her. Suddenly there were whispers from the people. They didn't understand what was going on, or who the girl next to her was. Roxy pushed her sister's hand away and asked if she'd lost her mind. Then she pulled her toward the exit, telling her to talk it over in private. But the girl stopped and said she wasn't going anywhere until she got what was hers. She told Roxy that she had taken the precious thing her mother had given her without asking. At this point, the girl stopped and said that it was all a laugh. After she finished laughing, she turned to her sister and told her to face the truth and asked, "Have you forgotten that she was the only reason you had a beautiful life?" Roxy said she owed her for life. She laughed, then asked how she dared to come to her like that. She then took off her gemstone earring and said, "You're not even aware that Rihanna is missing a piece of jewelry that was given to her as a gift." At this point, Eden returned to the mansion. His mom was very angry with him. She asked if he was even sane, why he had to send her there in the first place. A child who had never even been in high society more than once, she wouldn't even know how to behave. She just resented it. But Eden said that she wasn't a little girl anymore, and it wasn't appropriate to tell her now. She didn't need to worry so much. There's a reason she needed to go there. He wishes he could tell her the truth, but he can't because she asked him not to tell her anything. Evely sighed indignantly and said that meant don't worry. What if something happened to her there, or someone started to hurt her? What would she do then? The boy thought that he really wanted to be near her at that moment more than anyone. But still, this place was meant for someone else, namely Felix. Meanwhile, the showdown continued on the floor. Roxy asked if it was her fault. She had decided to take the dogs out on her. She asked how she had managed to steal such a jewel without getting caught. Rihanna was angry. She said she wasn't at all, but at that moment her sister asked if she was getting a little bolder already. Let her watch her tongue. But Rihanna got angry and told her to shut up. Does she think everyone in the world is as mean as she is? Roxy asked what she was doing. How dare she say such a thing? The girl said that no matter how hard life is, no matter how precious a thing is, no matter how enviable, not everyone would resort to stealing like she did. At that moment, Roxy took a swing at her sister and wondered if she had made her point. But when she threw her punch, the wine glass shattered, right into a passing Lloyd. The guy was shocked when he saw the whole thing. Roxy immediately started apologizing to the Duke. She said she didn't mean to do that at all. The guy replied that it was okay. He liked the color red. At that moment, Rihanna was surprised and wondered if he had done it on purpose. Lloyd turned, looked at the girl and winked at her. At that moment, Roxy bowed and apologized for not saying hello to him earlier. She said he probably didn't remember her, so she introduced herself. When the boy heard her name, he remembered it at once. Then he asked if she was the one who was to be engaged to the dispenser's son, but at that moment, Rihanna heard a very familiar voice. A guy came up behind her, put his hand on her shoulder, and told her that he wasn't hers at all. He told Duke Cornwall that his fiancée was Rihanna Dispenser. Of course, it was Felix. Rihanna looked at him in surprise. She didn't understand what was going on. Then the boy leaned over and said that he seemed to be a little late. He would like to say a lot of things, but apparently now was not the right time to say them. The boy looked angrily at Roxy, who was standing next to them. At that moment, the girl thought, and what she was doing wrong next to the Duke of Cornwall. But then the girl was glad, and realized that at least this was how she was able to meet such a highly esteemed duke. It would be great if she didn't have Rihanna around. But when Roxy noticed that no one was paying attention to her, she became very angry. Roxy turned around and started to walk away. When Rihanna saw this, you immediately ran after her and told her to stop. But Felix grabbed the girl's arm and told her to leave her alone. The girl said she had something else to work out, so he'd let her finish what she'd started. Felix let go of her hand and the girl ran away. Lloyd said it must be something important and asked if she was okay. At that moment, Rihanna ran out after her sister and told you to stop because they weren't done talking, but Roxy didn't listen to her. She kept walking. After that, she turned to her sister and said that she was fed up with her. Why did she stick to her? After that, she took off Sergei and told her to choke on that tzatziki.